Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We're thrilled to have photographer Lissa Rivera and BJ Lillis, a doctoral student in history at Princeton University, as tonight's guest speakers. Lissa is a photographer and curator based in Brooklyn. She received her MFA from SVA, where she became fascinated with the social history of photography and the evolution of identity, sexuality, and gender in relationship to material culture. Beautiful Boy is her latest project. The project is a collaboration with BJ, her romantic partner, and Muse. Without giving too much away, it originated from a confession between friends and developed into a sustained series of intimate portrait sessions, which both challenged prescribed gender roles and allowed BJ an opportunity to explore and express his identity. During the past year, glowing reviews and features appeared in the New York Times, Art Forum, Harper's Bazaar, Forbes, Paper Magazine, and the Huffington Post, among many others. We are so lucky to have you both here tonight. Welcome to our lecture series.
As Jaime said, I was a student of Katrine's a while ago, and she's always been really supportive of my work, so I really appreciate it because I graduated in 2009, so that's a long time to keep supporting someone. Come
on already.
Yeah. So, yep, Lissa Rivera is my name, BJ Lillis. So I'll start in the past. I really hated photography when I was a kid. That was me. And my dad really liked photography equipment, like lenses and lights and flashes and stuff. So I would be like the test model. So I was just like sitting there like this for like 3 hours while he was figuring out like how the lights worked. And then he'd say that, oh, like, I'll take you here or like I'll build you like a tree house. And like, no, it was a trick. So this is a small town where I grew up, really, really small town. That was like the most exciting thing in town. It looks like crap now, but like when I was little, it was like the best thing. It's like, I don't know what it was, like an old warehouse or something. But then like a half-hour drive away was the George Eastman house, and it was this really incredible, diamond or gem out in the Rust Belt area that really alluded to a grander past of the area near Rochester, New York. And so George Eastman is very important to the history of photography. And I really got exposed to photography in a really particular way there because like mostly what they would display in their permanent collection, they'd have some art shows, would be like the technology, the history of the technology of photography. And then when I was in middle school, I bought a Man Ray book, and I was like, wow, I was like, who are these people? Like, why don't I have cool friends like this, like what's going on? I didn't understand. Then I was like looking at these images, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. So then I was like, oh, my friends like think I'm weird, so maybe I'll just dress up my 10-year-old sister to look like a Man Ray photograph. So this is like I think like the first roll of film I ever shot, like in one of those plastic test cameras, and there wasn't really a photography department in high school, so that's why the film looks so bad, because I didn't know what I was doing. But you can see there's my friend Randy. I was like, oh, you should be a little more Salvador Dali or something. And here's BJ.
So yeah, I talk about my childhood mainly because she talks about her childhood, and we feel there should be some kind of parody. But I grew up outside of New York in Sleepy Hollow, pretty different from Manchester, New York. And there's a lot of really incredible, rich history there. I always, until very recently, assumed that was a coincidence that I was into colonial history, but it's been brought to my attention that that's probably not a coincidence. So I had like a really pretty idyllic childhood in a lot of ways. This is a picture of me and my sister, which I like to show because we look exactly the same. Even if this was a better photograph in which the image was sharp, we would still look exactly the same. So I had a really, I actually did not really question my gender identity as a child. I probably had some sort of, I remember looking in the mirror and being very surprised, especially as I went through puberty, by what was going on, which is a somewhat universal experience, I know, but just feeling like, okay, like this is strange, like this doesn't seem, right. But I didn't connect that with gender. I didn't connect that with gender identity. And I really like to talk about this because there's a very powerful narrative in our culture that is wonderful and important and so true for so many people, which is like the queer person or the trans woman or trans man who's like trying on their mom's dresses when they're 5 years old. And there are a lot of memoirs along those lines, and it's great, but a lot of people don't have that experience. A lot of people make sense of this stuff as adults, and that's something that I think is important to recognize. So I went off to college, and I started to experiment with my identity, basically. And by the time I got to my senior year, I was wearing women's clothing full time and trying to figure out if I was a trans woman. And it's really, I went to a small liberal arts college, so it was a very idyllic space, and all the conversations that are happening in our culture now around gender identity happened in like 1993 at Wesleyan. So like there were like gender neutral bathrooms in all the halls, and it was a big shock for, kids coming here from the Midwest, and suddenly they're like, 18 years old and sharing a bathroom with a girl on their hall, and like, but this kind of, the conversation was really happening, and that created a lot of space. But at the same time, I was pretty lost in that space. Like I was experimenting, but I was having trouble kind of seeing the end. So when I came to New York, I basically, I got a job at a museum. It was a normal job. I was working in an office. And this is another thing I like to stress. The people that I worked with were wonderful people. They're very supportive, and they would have been completely supportive if I'd come in on a dress on my first day. It wouldn't have affected my working relationships. The thing is, though, that it would have been this extremely public statement that people would have taken to be this big thing. And if I changed my mind the next week and then changed my mind again the week after that, I would have started losing people really fast. I think that's true, and that's also what I perceived at the time. And so it was really hard for me. I was kind of just stuck. I was stuck in a space where I was no longer in a space of experimentation that is sort of set aside by our society as a space of experimentation, but I hadn't finished yet. And that is sort of where I was, and I'll hand it back over to
And like, we both started around the same time, but the conversations that we're having now were not, or maybe just starting them, but still pretty foreign to most people. So it would have been a lot to explain. So that, I was working there too, but I was like in here all the time. I was like working, I was like in the digital lab, and I had to, the dungeon. I'd have to photograph like 300 things a day. But there is amazing stuff in the collection that really opened my eyes to narratives from the past. So these photos are by Carl Van Vechten, and he photographed like the queer community and African American artists before they became well known. A lot of people that he photographed are yet to be rediscovered. So that archive is there. It's really incredible. And also the Broadway Theater Archive, and you could see different artists in the past experimenting with gender, and also artists who didn't stick to one medium, like really inspired me. Like here is Chanticleer with the chicken lady at the top, and she's actually a rooster, and that was like hugely controversial. they said like a woman couldn't play a cock, and it was like all over the newspapers, and it became this huge phenomenon. This is what BJ was working on.
Yeah, so I was working upstairs in the curatorial department on an exhibition that's now open at the City Museum called New York at its Core, which I encourage you all to go to. And one of the things that I kind of found while I was poking around, I was a research assistant, so I actually spent a lot of time poking around. Like, the curator would kind of be like, well, you know, we need some people for our exhibition, so go, you know, poke around. And so I was kind of like going through a lot of things, and I found this person named Jenny June, or Earl, and we don't actually have a good way of knowing what the best name or pronouns would be for this person because, you know, they're not around to tell us, and it wasn't a conversation happening at that time. Jenny, but I like to talk about this a little because this is kind of something that I was really thinking about a lot and working on when we started this project. So Jenny June was the first, maybe not in the world, I don't know about the world, but in the United States, the first what we might now call like a trans activist. So she was born in the 1870s in Connecticut to a middle-class family, went to Columbia, went to law school, was probably a lawyer. She's not actually connected to a person, you know, like a birth record or a person who exists in that, you know, in the archives of the government. But she was really active in the 1890s in a community of women or people who called themselves androgynes and were ambiguously gendered in different ways. And she wrote these books, 3 of them actually, which were published by medical presses, actually, basically saying that, you know, describing the community, describing her life, and saying that we should be allowed to do this. This is okay. This is who we are. You can't, you know, it's cruel to try and stop us from doing this. And as I said, it was like, I mean, no one was saying that in 1920, as I'm sure you can imagine in print. But the thing that I really like to think about with Jenny June is just, you know, what it would have been like for a person who might now be trans, or might now not be trans, might now be genderqueer, in a time before the medical technology that makes transition possible existed, and what kind of experience that would have been for someone living in their body when the idea of changing that body in the way that is now really an incredible tool that relieves so much suffering for so many people. But in this time, that tool didn't exist, and people had to find a different way to exist in the body they had. And one of the ways that Jenny June tried to do that was by turning to art and the classical tradition and associating herself with the Greco-Roman artistic tradition, as you see in these beautiful posed photos. This is like my section where I talk, so bear with me, and then I'll get back to her and like the real art stuff you're here for. So I like to show, usually I like do this transition more smoothly, I feel like, but I like to show this slide as I kind of have people thinking about Jenny June and what her or his or their relationship to their body might have been. So this is from a book called The Expressiveness of the Body, which is a comparative history of Greek, Western and Chinese medicine in the medieval and Renaissance period. And I love this picture because one of the things that the author of this book tells us is that two cultural traditions, very involved cultural traditions, very elaborated cultural traditions that had developed over centuries, trying to understand what certainly seems to be the same thing, which is the human body, just came away with totally, totally different things. Like, if you were aliens and you were like examining these two things, you would think it was 2 different kinds of human body. And this picture illustrates that quite beautifully, the fact that Chinese doctors spent, as I said, centuries or thousands of years studying the human body and they never came up with a word for muscles. So they didn't see them. How could you, you cut open a cadaver and you don't have a concept of muscles, you don't have a word for muscles, so you don't see the muscle. You're not going to use you're not going to think about the muscle. And so it's just kind of like this idea of like, so what is a muscle really? Like, is a muscle a thing we have in our bodies, or is a muscle a way of talking about our bodies, or an idea we have about our bodies? And that's kind of how I think about gender, is that it's not a character of our bodies, it's a way of talking about our bodies, and a way of talking about a lot of other things too. But I feel like destabilizing the muscle is like a fun way to get to that. So yeah, back over.
Yeah. So when we started this project, we were friends at work, and I was kind of going through an existential crisis, and BJ was covering up maybe an existential crisis. And then like we were on a long subway ride, because it's like New York. And he always like listened to me, so I was just saying like, oh, I want to feel more honest, I don't feel like I express myself. And then BJ was like, oh, like I wear dresses at home. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, oh, it's okay. Like I feel like I'm in drag all the time. Like I'm just always dressing up like for whatever I feel like the world needs of me. And then we just started talking about things more and more. And then we were really like connecting some of the ideas of our experience with the idea of like the archive or the past, and kind of what we were absorbing from working at the museum. So here is a postcard that Duchamp twisted a bit of the Mona Lisa, twisted the gender here, but I just put that up for fun. But I'm really talking about the Mona Lisa itself, the painting, and it was like stolen. It was stolen in 1918, and it was all over the newspapers, and at that time they could reproduce photographs. So everyone got to know the Mona Lisa as this like famous picture because it was reproduced so many times. And really repetition really drives familiarity. So perhaps this is why you get this phenomenon over here where this is the most reproduced painting, yet everyone's seeing it like they're seeing their mother, or they're seeing like it reminds me of 2001 Space Odyssey or something, where everyone's taking a picture of something that's so widely photographed because it's familiar and maybe comfortable, and they're able to say, oh, I see this all the time, therefore this must be a good painting. And you can see over here in the 1880s, in the 1870s, celebrities of the stage began selling photographs of themselves to reinforce recognition. And you could see Kim Kardashian over here, who's really a genius at Instagram and a genius at dressing in a way to be photographed, to be seen, and that increases her familiarity. And no one really knows why she's famous, but she's really good at using the image to become very familiar and create a desirable image. It's really changed the body in the world, like all over the world, like what people desire in her body type. And you could see over here different tropes with the way that people play with gender over time. So this is Vesta Tilley, a male impersonator from the 19th century. And then you could see Anna May Wong, Josephine Baker, Marlene Dietrich, Brigitte Bardot, and how people play with this language, the language of gender and fashion over time, and how we all collage these things, especially in the digital era. I've experienced this. I don't know if you've experienced this, where you watch a movie that's very visually pleasing, and then afterwards you look in the mirror and you're like, do I look like Catherine Deneuve? Like, and for a second maybe you're like, I do, and then you're like, no, I don't. And it kind of like stays with you, and it affects a few days, and maybe like your dinner conversation like is a little bit off, because you've like incorporated their character into yourself. And I think that identity is always fluid and changing based off of so many things, based off of the images that you see, different relationships, someone who bumps into you on the subway, anything like could change so much of you, and it's always like evolving. And here another example of like a powerful image. Here is Twiggy, and then she got this short haircut and someone discovered her photo in the hair salon. And then in 2 years, she became the face of 1966. And then you could see here someone copying the style in 2011. And then over here, it's a YouTube makeup tutorial. Like, YouTube is like an amazing like resource into the human mind. But this is like a young woman emulating Twiggy. And I also like to look at the legacy of color and femininity. Not many people know that Natalie Kelmus was the color supervisor at Technicolor from 34 to 49. She was the estranged wife of the founder of Technicolor. So like all of those classic golden age of Hollywood Technicolor films, she dictated all of the colors, like Singing in the Rain, everything like that. And also at Disney Studios, with the exception of like maybe like less than a handful, women were only allowed to work in the ink and paint department, so they came up with the colors. And you could see down here, I'm really interested in these images that are repeated in everyone's psyche, these classic kind of iconic images, and also the beginning of fashion photography, which really coincided with like Freudian analysis and different psychological experiments that like Steichen and other photographers were working with. And they also came out of the surrealist tradition. So some of the images that were used to sell things to people were actually a little bit sinister out of the context of the magazine. Like, these are scary. These are published in like Vogue, but they're really frightening, and I love it. And I also look at, not only how commercial photography is like deeply embedded in the DNA of our identities, but also how artists can't help but copy images that they see. And how as an artist you even like start making art because you see something that really moves you that's extremely beautiful, and then you want to make it yourself so you can have it somehow. So here's an example of a type of image passed down throughout history. And so when BJ and I started the project, we're really influenced by Kenneth Anger, who was making like very queer identity-related films, like when it was actually illegal to do that. And Daisies too. So Vera Chidilova created this film, Daisies, that like really denies reality in a lot of senses, and I think she got kicked out of the country.
So like, I just like to add my own 2 cents to this. So you can imagine, I actually didn't have a strong background in this kind of art. I had some background in art history, and I had read tons of like gender theory, like these different, very academic books, because I came from a very kind of academic background. But I really didn't have any sense of like queer art, underground filmmaking, like films that don't play at like the multiplex. And so Lissa started sending me these Kenneth Anger videos on Facebook, and it was just like I cannot like overemphasize how much of like a mind-blown moment this was for me, just seeing how these people were playing with these ideas on just a visual level with so much freedom and so much integrity and beauty. And they weren't trying to explain it all, and they weren't trying to like define everything. They were just blowing things open in this way that suggested to me like a whole nother way of existing than I was existing. I don't think that would be an over-exaggeration, actually.
So this is the first photo I took of BJ, and then I took a picture of myself. I hadn't really taken portraits since like high school, so I was like, what do I do? Like, I haven't been doing this in a while. So I took these pretty bad pictures, and there I am testing it, and then there's BJ. But like the first time I took a picture of BJ, I kind of was like, my mind was blown. I was like, I just like connected to something. Like, BJ just was so vulnerable and like open to trying this experiment, because we had gotten to a point where I was like, oh, don't take selfies at home. I'll take a picture for you just so you could see what you look like. But then secretly I was like, and I want to try things out. Yeah, so there's the first picture, but it really, really meant a lot to us. And we didn't know, we didn't know like what it like meant or like what to do, and like our whole world was upside down for a while. We're like, are we living in a fantasy world? Can we have this life? Like, what is going on? So we just didn't know what to do. So for a while we were just confused. But BJ made this locket because we carried around those photos with us everywhere for months. And then BJ made this locket for like our first Christmas to represent the pictures. And then when we like decided, we're like, okay, we'll be together. And then we were like just taking pictures like crazy, like everything. I was like, oh, I'll try a documentary, or let's go to the park, or here's a piece of lace, let's take a picture. So we're just like experimenting. Yeah, like BJ was sick. I was like, it's a sick photo. This is great. Let's go to the park. And this was like scary because like we'd never like gone out in the neighborhood. Like, so it's a little bit more of a conservative, family-oriented neighborhood in Brooklyn. And then we just began like wildly experimenting, kind of like looking at anything that moved us and kind of exploring like why it like gave us that feeling. And just trying all different things and just having fun and not like really, 'cause so many times as an artist, like you go through school and you learn to make a portfolio of like 15 to 20 images, and they all have to fit in a theme, they all have to be consistent. But I, at that point, was just trying to find like a place of honesty. So I was like, let's just follow like our desires completely, because we have nothing to lose and not in school. Like, just completely follow whatever comes into our head. So here you can see this is relating to that tradition of the male impersonator that I showed you before, playing with mirrors and tights and fabrics. And this one is to show the distortion in the mirror. I'm really interested in how this really connects to contemporary culture, because I feel like if you look on social media, everyone's trying to figure out what they look like, because you can never see yourself actually, because every lens distorts and every mirror has some kind of distortion in it. So you can never like fully see yourself the way other people can see you. And you also don't have control over the body that you're born into very much at all. You're kind of like stuck in your body. So kind of like thinking about those ideas and thinking about Lacan's idea of the mirror stage, and just trying out anything that I thought would be beautiful. And it felt amazing as a woman to have this opportunity to have a partner that I could look at and in this way and have working with me as a muse, because throughout art history, like, I don't think that very many women have had that experience. And I'm just so influenced by different filmmakers like Fellini or Cassavetes or Bergman, who worked with their lovers as their muses, and had partners who really stayed, like believed in the idea of kind of like working with them to express something. And there is some kind of like dedication there, and like BJ was so happy to like, and has so much fun doing these things with me. At least he tells me he does. No, BJ like gets mad if I don't take pictures after, you know. It's like, we haven't taken pictures in a while. So here we like went back to different places that were more biographical. So this was actually at Wesleyan's. We went back to Wesleyan, and then to BJ's parents' house. And we didn't know like what BJ's parents would think of all this. BJ's dad's here, so obviously they were accepting, but I was like scared. I was like, oh God, like I'm dating BJ, he's such a sweetheart, and like now his parents are gonna think I'm crazy. So yeah, and then we like, so like the earliest photos were really just the one with the fabric backdrop. So those were just taken in the kitchen, and I had like broken up with my ex, and like I had to have someone move into my bedroom, and I slept in the living room, and we shot everything in the kitchen. So I had to take out the kitchen table every time. So I was like, this is annoying. So we went like to a motel in Virginia, and I spent a long time like looking for kind of like archetypal ways that women are photographed. Even in art, I feel like women are photographed, or femininity is represented in a certain way that you just see repeated over and over again. So if my picture looks like someone else's picture, that's it's supposed to be referencing other pictures.
I do like to say here that this hotel, one of the things that Lissa is so good at is like finding the spot, and she knows what she wants and she will find it. And I think that she must have looked at every like motel listing on the East Coast, from like New Jersey. I think I told her that I wouldn't drive into South Carolina, but from New Jersey to North Carolina, like thousands and thousands of like TripAdvisor postings, like hotel listings, to find the hotel, the motel, perhaps the only motel, perhaps it now I think was renovated last year, so it's now gone too, but the only motel that had been built in the 50s and the interior had not been touched. So I do think it's incredible for me as a person who would not even think to do that, let alone then be able to do it if I thought to do it, to see her dedication to finding the right thing.
Yeah, I think that like this is a residency we did at the Ace Hotel, and I really wanted this to look like Whistler's mother, but also like I feel like in movies, like women are always supposed to like discover their sexuality in the bathtub, so I wanted to be like very like asexual, but like with oversized pearls. And then like the Ace Hotel is kind of like 90s meets 60s, so we did like a Kate Moss photo. And then we went to Italy, in this really amazing old house that was like the owner of the town's house, and like it was so old, it was like a 900-year-old house, and like the floor was like indented where people like walked through over the years, like the stone was all worn. It was amazing. So we're just trying to like, I really like the idea of like absorbing the energy from architecture, and like the idea of exploring like domestic space. It went at the same time exploring like gender and femininity. And I'm really interested in like, how do you figure out how women became the subjects and the muses, and like also, like how in fairy tales or in different myths, because women were so much of the domestic sphere, the idea of fashion, or like having the best long hair, Goldilocks, or Cinderella, like a fairy godmother gives her a really great dress, and she was completely invisible to the prince before, and then like all of a sudden she was like noticed, and then the shoes, and like so much of the feminine narratives like in Disney that I think are like, that we watched repetitively as children, are like so in our psyches. And also like the pleasure, like I love some of those early Disney films, and I get a lot of pleasure from watching them. So like looking at like the pleasure and also like the entrapment of like these like really visually striking images or stories that really are deeply embedded into our consciousness. So here's Venice. And then I really like a lot of what I do like has to do with the fact that while I'm working, I listen to a lot of like biography channel reruns. So it'll be like a rerun about Sharon Tate or like some, like any random, or Frances Farmer. I'll like listen to them all, like tragic Hollywood stories really influence most of the work. So if I like listen to something about the 60s, then like I have to find like a 60s house. So we went to, this is like Joshua Tree. This is Palm Springs, a motel. Palm Springs. Again, I was really like obsessed with Priscilla Presley for a while. And then this is like more Larry Sultan, like that photo Larry Sultan took of his mom, like always like it was just like so shocking to see. There was something so poignant about it. So this is about my obsession with Larry Sultan's mom. And just like the way that women are photographed, even when it seems like it's questioning, it's still this kind of repetition. I saw someone wearing a clear raincoat on YouTube, so that's that. Priscilla, like the idea of her being like this virginal ideal, and like after she had the baby, like Elvis didn't want to have anything to do with her anymore, and just like her being young and like sexualized at the same time with all that makeup and hair, and like these kind of like conservative yet erotic environments of of the 60s. And this is more recent, so no one's seen these before. It's a secret.
I didn't know they were in here.
So we went to a religious complex where there were many different residencies, starting with like an all-male mission and then going through all these different kind of failed occupancies of extreme religious practices. So there is a lot of energy in this space. They were exploring, found an old gym. There is a lot of different stuff going on. This is like where all the men would bathe together. This is like, there is like mice getting in the clothes. Like there was a mouse in that dress. There's bat poop on the ground. It was like so crazy. And this is how the work looks like when it's printed out. So this is a show I had over the summer. Yeah, so that's the end. Do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
It seems as if you're also inspired by the clothes, the actual dress. And so do you two go shopping for those unusual fabrics and dresses and so forth that we see in there? You must have quite a stash now.
Yeah, so it's, Lissa does the lion's share of the styling. It's collaborative. The way I usually would describe it is that it's a collaborative in terms of the fantasies and the ideas, but I could not, I just don't have the capability to realize those fantasies in the way she does. And so the selection of the pieces then is almost always her, because one of the things that she's so good at is taking, what for me is an abstract idea of how I might look or how I might feel, and turning it into a, piece of fabric which we can afford. And so she does a lot of digging around on the internet, on eBay and things like that. But then we've also gone together to different, we went to Broomfield one year and got a lot of stuff. And we mostly use very damaged clothing because that's all we can afford. But it does kind of add something. And the truth is that because the clothes wouldn't be wearable, it allows you to get something that, if it was wearable, would be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. And then it sort of opens up the potential to find almost any era or any feeling in the fabric.
Yeah, I'm really sensitive to color and fabric, and I'll literally look at every purple dress on eBay, even if it takes me a week, because it has to be a certain thing, and I don't have a lot of money, but I have really expensive tastes. So it takes forever, and trying different keywords out, and but I love doing it. But I used to collect snapshots and vernacular photography, so I have the collector's gene. So I'm always we just have a whole room full of dresses now, or not a whole room, a big rack of stuff.
3 big racks of stuff.
But it's like really important to have a lot of things, so that's why, like usually like I'll pack a lot of stuff like when we go somewhere, so then we could improvise with the colors once we get there.
And it is for me, just to one more thing on that, it is for me, it is really, like putting on an outfit is really can be a transformative thing. And I don't think that that's just true of art, but like even just when you get dressed in the morning, like like you wake up and you take a shower and you're naked and then you put clothes on and you've become something different that's ready to go out into the world. And so for me, I would say that everything starts when I put the dress on. And once I have the dress on and I'm in the space, I'm having an experience or I'm inhabiting something. And that is what I try to express or channel into the photographs.
Okay, I was gonna ask. The word that came to my mind when I see some of your photographs is isolation. Like this one, and some of the way they use the lighting kind of reminds me of Edward Hopper, like this one right here. It's really, really beautiful, your lighting, and I love your story. Do you carry a lot of equipment? Do you try to use natural lighting mostly?
Yeah, there's only one time, like maybe one or two times where I didn't use natural lighting, and I really just was using gels to throw some like color on it, because I feel like a lot of people are using gels now in fashion photography, so I'm even like commenting on trends that are happening now and trying to relate them to the past. But we really are very minimal because we don't want to draw a lot of attention when we're in the spaces. Like we want people to give us permission and not feel like there wasn't, yeah, it's just a tripod and a camera. But I try to get a really good lens, and BJ's really good at holding still for like exposures.
I've learned. I've slowly been learning.
Yeah, and the isolation is like really important because I feel like with beauty, like to achieve like this very extreme, or not extreme, but like developed femininity, and a lot of it has to do with economics, like the idea of some women who could develop this very astute and polished feminine identity with plastic surgery or with designer clothes. And I feel like it can be very isolating at the same time, like they're achieving some kind of power. So I always feel like sometimes I see wealthy women, I feel like it might, who focus on that, and like without any judgments, like feeling that it can be like a very isolating thing, and also like the idea of like domestic space and the time it takes to groom and stuff being an isolating thing.
You began talking about your relationship, and you clearly are so in sync. And BJ is your muse. BJ, do you ever object to the idea that she has for a pose, or?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'm pretty down for anything, because one of the beautiful things about doing this, and the thing that made it so, especially at this point, this is like just really fun, but when we were starting, it was something that was really helping me a lot, sort of figure out my own identity and how I was going to feel comfortable, was realizing we didn't really talk about identity, right, during the talk. Sometimes, the talk is kind of like, how we were feeling that night, and so sometimes we talk a lot about identity, and I don't think we did this time. But I really don't think of identity or as gender as this like innate thing, where it's like we like to ask, we like to say in our culture, be yourself, like that's a thing we say, and I think that's really strange. Like, can I not be myself? But there's this idea that you can't be yourself totally, but you can strive to be yourself. You can like strive to fulfill who you are inside. and that it's something that you could never reach all the way, but you can like go for it. And then there's like this perfect like BJ inside of you that you're trying to fulfill and to like flower into existence. I think it's just like a load of crap, actually. And so for me, this is all about like, no, like you are what you do and where you go. And I can wear a dress today and I can wear pants tomorrow, and maybe the person at the cash register at CVS is going to give me ma'am today and sir tomorrow, and like that's just like, that's okay. And so, like, this was going to answer the question, but now I can't remember what the question was.
Oh, like if you say no to things?
Oh yeah, so I'll do almost anything because it's not making some kind of commitment about like, oh, I did this in a photograph, so this is like part of who I am or something. But it is, I mean, in one way of thinking. But it's just something that we're, trying out. But at the same time, sometimes I just don't want to do something. She really wants me to wear wigs sometimes, and I won't do that.
Well, like BJ, like,
Not for a good reason.
Yeah, it's so funny because like, I like do BJ's hair and makeup, and I only know how the way like I learned on myself because I'm not a stylist. So then like they're often like self-portraits or some self-portraits too. And also like when I started the project, some people suggested that I do like a documentary on BJ, but then I wanted to show people that fantasy is just as like part of life as reality. So much of your reality is like a smesh of fantasy, and your thoughts and imagination and your dreams are interplaying throughout the day. So really like we're trying to like, document our fantasies, and like, I don't know what they mean, but maybe you could analyze me for better or worse through it. And like what we're saying really is just about ourselves. It's really very personal.
This has been a really tremendously well-received body of work, and I mean, you guys kind of like took New York by storm this year. I feel like there's so many reviews and a couple of shows in town. You were talking about budgets, and I'm wondering if this kind of success opens up different possibilities as well, and have there been any people knocking on your door commercially? Just curious.
I don't know. I just blow the money as soon as I get it on more stuff. Like we're going to Pulse and we have like a solo booth, and I was like, we need to upholster the chairs, and I need to get chintz and like wallpaper, but wallpaper from the 30s, and we need a large blue thing for this corner. So then the money is just gone, and like I don't know. I work at a museum, so I don't really do a lot of commercial work. So I think I would have to put in effort in a way to make money, but I'm not very good at that. Like we do get a lot of press and stuff, but then I don't know how to like make money from it. I'm just like looking at dresses on eBay instead of like putting together a commercial portfolio.
Right. Thank you so much.